A barbarian is a human who is perceived to be uncivilized or primitive. The designation is usually applied as generalization based on a popular stereotype. Barbarians can be any member of a nation judged by some to be less civilized or orderly, but may also be part of a certain primitive cultural group or social class both within and outside one's own nation. Alternatively, they may instead be admired and romanticized as noble savages. In idiomatic or figurative usage, a barbarian may also be an individual reference to a brutal, cruel, warlike, insensitive person. The term originates from the Greek beta alpha rho Omicron sigma. In ancient times, Greeks used it mostly for people of different cultures. But there are examples where one Greek city or state would use the word to attack another. In the early modern period and sometimes later, Greeks used it for the Turks, in a clearly pejorative way. Comparable notions are found in non-European civilizations, notably China and Japan. In the Roman Empire, Romans used the word barbarian for many people, such as the Germanics, Celts, Iberians, Thracians and Parthians. Etymology. The ancient Greek word beta alpha rho Omicron sigma, barbarian, was an antonym for pi Omicron lambda iota tau eta sigma, citizen. The sound of barbarous onomatopoetically evokes the image of babbling. The earliest attested form of the word is the Mycenaean Greek parparo, written in linear bisyllabic script. The Greeks and Romans used the term as they encountered scores of different foreign cultures, including the Egyptians, Persians, Medes, Celts, Germanic peoples, Phoenicians and Carthaginians. In fact, it became a common term to refer to all foreigners. However, in various occasions, the term was also used by Greeks, especially the Athenians, to deride other Greek tribes and states but also fellow Athenians, in a pejorative and politically motivated manner. Of course, the term also carried a cultural dimension to its dual meaning. The verb beta alpha rho iota zeta epsilon iota nu in ancient Greek meant imitating the linguistic sounds non-Greeks made or making grammatical errors in Greek. Plato rejected the Greek-barbarian dichotomy as a logical absurdity on just such grounds. Dividing the world into Greeks and non-Greeks told one nothing about the second group. Yet Plato used the term barbarian frequently in his seventh letter. In Homer's works, the term appeared only once, in the form beta alpha rho Omicron phi omega nu Omicron sigma, used of the Carians fighting for Troy during the Trojan War. In general, the concept of barbarous did not figure largely in archaic literature before the 5th century BC. Still, it has been suggested that barbarophanoi in the Iliad signifies not those who spoke a non-Greek language but simply those who spoke Greek badly. A change occurred in the connotations of the word after the Greco-Persian Wars in the first half of the 5th century BC. Here a hasty coalition of Greeks defeated the vast Persian Empire. Indeed, in the Greek of this period, barbarian is often used expressly to refer to Persians, who were enemies of the Greeks in this war. Greek barbarous was the etymological source for many words meaning barbarian, including English barbarian, which was first recorded in 16th century Middle English. A word barbara is also found in the Sanskrit of ancient India. The Greek word barbarous is related to Sanskrit barbaras. Semantics. The Oxford English Dictionary defines 5 meanings of the noun barbarian, including an obsolete Barbary usage. 1. Etymologically, a foreigner, one whose language and customs differ from the speaker's. 2. Hist. A. One not a Greek. B. One living outside the pale of the Roman Empire and its civilization, applied especially to the northern nations that overthrew them. C. One outside the pale of Christian civilization. D. With the Italians of the Renaissance. One of a nation outside of Italy. 3. A rude, wild, uncivilized person. B. Sometimes distinguished from savage. C. Applied by the Chinese contemptuously to foreigners. 4. An uncultured person, or one who has no sympathy with literary culture. 5. A native of Barbary. See Barbary coast, obese. B. Barbary pirates and A. Barbary horse, obese. The OED barbarous entry summarizes the semantic history. The sense development in ancient times was foreign, non-Hellenic, later, outlandish, rude, brutal, not Latin nor Greek, then, pertaining to those outside the Roman Empire, hence, uncivilized, uncultured, and later, non-Christian, whence, Saracen, heathen, and generally, savage, rude, savagely cruel, inhuman, barbarian, in Greek historical contexts. Slavery in Greece. A parallel factor was the growth of chattel slavery, especially at Athens. Although enslavement of Greeks for non-payment of debt continued in most Greek states, it was banned at Athens under Solon in the early 6th century BC. Under the Athenian democracy established California, 508 BC, slavery came to be used on a scale never before seen among the Greeks. Massive concentrations of slaves were worked under especially brutal conditions in the silver mines at Lorient. A major vein of silver-bearing ore was found there in 483 BC, while the phenomenon of skilled slave craftsmen producing manufactured goods in small factories and workshops became increasingly common. Furthermore, slaves were no longer the preserve of the rich. All but the poorest of Athenian households came to have slaves to supplement the work of their free members. Overwhelmingly, the slaves of Athens were barbarian in origin, drawn especially from lands around the Black Sea such as Thrace and Taurica, while from Asia Minor came above all Lydians, Phrygians and Carians. Aristotle even states that barbarians are slaves by nature. From this period, words like barbarophonos, cited above from Homer, began to be used not only of the sound of a foreign language but of foreigners speaking Greek improperly. In Greek, the notions of language and reason are easily confused in the word logos, so speaking poorly was easily conflated with being stupid. Further changes occurred in the connotations of barbari, barbaroi in late antiquity, when bishops and catholicoi were appointed to sees connected to cities among the civilized gens barbaricae such as in Armenia or Persia, whereas bishops were appointed to supervise entire peoples among the less settled. Eventually the term found a hidden meaning by Christian Romans through the folk etymology of Cassiodorus. He stated the word barbarian was made up of barbar and rus, for barbarians did not live in cities, making their abodes in the fields like wild animals. The female given name of Barbara originally meant a barbarian woman, and as such was likely to have had a pejorative meaning, given that most such women in Greco-Roman society were of a low social status. However, Saint Barbara is mentioned as being the daughter of rich and respectable Roman citizens. Evidently, by her time the name no longer had any specific ethnic or pejorative connotations. This conclusion is, however, questionable, as many authorities think it possible that her story is fictitious, including the Roman Catholic Church since 1969. Hellenic stereotypes. Out of those sources the Hellenic stereotype was elaborated. Barbarians are like children, unable to speak or reason properly, cowardly, effeminate, luxurious, cruel, unable to control their appetites and desires, politically unable to govern themselves. These stereotypes were voiced with much shrillness by writers like Isocrates in the 4th century BCE, who called for a war of conquest against Persia, as a panacea for Greek problems. However, the Hellenic stereotype of barbarians was not a universal feature of Hellenic culture. Xenophon, for example, wrote the Cyropedia, a laudatory fictionalized account of Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Persian Empire, effectively a utopian text. In his Anabasis, Xenophon's accounts of the Persians and other non-Greeks he knew or encountered hardly seem to be under the sway of these stereotypes at all. The renowned orator Demosthenes made derogatory comments in his speeches, using the word barbarian. Barbarian is used in its Hellenic sense by St. Paul in the New Testament to describe non-Greeks, and to describe one who merely speaks a different language. About 100 years after Paul's time, Lucian, a native of Samosata, in the former kingdom of Commagene, which had been absorbed by the Roman Empire and made part of the province of Syria, used the term barbarian to describe himself. As he was a noted satirist, this could have been a deprecating self-irony. It might also have indicated that he was descended from Samosata's original Semitic population, likely to have been called barbarians by later Hellenistic, Greek-speaking settlers, and who might have eventually taken up this appellation themselves. The term retained its standard usage in the Greek language throughout the Middle Ages, as it was widely used by the Byzantine Greeks until the fall of the Byzantine Empire in the 15th century. Cicero described the mountain area of Inner Sardinia as a land of barbarians, with these inhabitants also known by the manifestly pejorative term latrones mastricati. The region is up to the present known as Barbagia, which is traceable to this old barbarian designation, but no longer consciously associated with it, and are used naturally as the name of the region by its own inhabitants. The dying Galatian statues some insight about the Hellenistic perception of and attitude to barbarians can be taken from the dying Galatian, a statue commissioned by Attalus I of Pergamon to celebrate his victory over the Celtic Galatians in Anatolia. The statue depicts with remarkable realism a dying Celt warrior with a typically Celtic hairstyle and moustache. He lies on his fallen shield while sword and other objects lie beside him. He appears to be fighting against death, refusing to accept his fate. The statue serves both as a reminder of the Celts' defeat, thus demonstrating the might of the people who defeated them, and a memorial to their bravery as worthy adversaries. The message conveyed by the sculpture, as H. W. Jansen comments, is that they knew how to die. Barbarians that they were. The Greeks admired Scythians and Galatians as heroic individuals, even in the case of Anacharsis as philosophers, but considered their culture to be barbaric. The Romans indiscriminately regarded the various Germanic tribes, the settled Gauls, and the raiding Huns as barbarians. The Romans adapted the term to refer to anything non-Roman. The German cultural historian Sylvia Vieta points out that the meaning of the word barbarous has undergone a semantic change in modern times, after Michel de Montaigne used it to characterize the activities in the New World of the Spaniards, supposedly representatives of the higher European culture, as barbarous, in a satirical essay of the year 1580. It was not the supposedly uncivilized Indian tribes who were barbarous, but the conquering Spaniards. Montaigne argued that Europeans noted the barbarism of other cultures but not the crueler and more brutal actions of their own society, particularly in the so-called religious wars. Montaigne's people, the Europeans, were the real barbarians. In this way, the Eurocentric argument was turned around and applied against the European invaders. With this shift of meaning, a whole literature arose in Europe that characterized the indigenous Indian peoples as innocent, and the militarily superior Europeans as barbarous intruders into a paradisiacal world.